Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on a reel I haven't worked on before. This one is a North Shore reel. It's an ST30 spinning reel. It says it's got 6 ball bearings, one-way clutch, aluminum spool and handle, and well, it's just not performing right. It's very tight, and if I could use the word cranky, it seems like it may have a bent axle shaft. I'm not sure. So what we're going to try and do is take this reel apart, see if we can improve the performance on it, and hopefully keep it fishing for some time to come. This reel doesn't say where it's made. We have the decal is missing. Made in China. Okay. And I assume that this is some kind of a store brand reel. Well, we're going to take this reel apart, see what's on the inside of it. We'll see if we can help it and give it a second chance. If you like these types of videos, if you like to see how reels are serviced, like to learn more about the fishing reels themselves, about how they're made and kind of the design in that, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button. That'll let you know when I'm posting videos that you may find interesting. Well, I always take my pieces and parts and I use a parts tray for them so that I know where they are when I go to reinstall. And we've started by removing the click ratchet and the spool shim that controls the line height. Next up then, we're going to take out the retention screw, which is holding the rotor nut from slipping, and then we should be able to remove this rotor nut. There's not a big gap in the rotor, so you can get in there with an open wrench. You can use a deep socket too, but I'm removing it this way because my take on this is that the case goes up and under the rotor, so you have to take it off that way. But we have a one-way clutch with an override for the anti-reverse. This is the switch that's going to operate that. That switch will come in and out and move this gear back and forth to shut that on and off. We have a screw that's holding on the handle on this side. This could be taken out by a screwdriver. You could probably even use a coin. That's a huge slot there. And I think for the most part this is going to be a straight up, pretty even kind of a mechanism. I don't think there's anything interesting in here, but we're going to find out. The net on this one is you should always keep your reel serviced. Doesn't matter who makes the reel or how it's made. It's most important to service it so that it doesn't break down on you when you're fishing. Well, there's 3 side plate screws that I can tell here. And it looks like the side plate is just going to be this little piece here. So even though the screws are on this side, the plate should come out from the other side. This is a 30 size reel. The 30 size reel is appropriate for fresh water, some inshore saltwater or ocean fishing, depends on where you're going, what you're doing, and good from a pier, from a dock, fishing. It's a spinning reel, so it's usually associated with like a 6 or 7 foot pole, maybe a little bit longer if you're trying surf casting. And we just took the 3 screws out. I lay them on my desk to make sure they're all the same size before I remove. Those 3 screws should enable me now to take off this side plate. I didn't see anything else in there that looks like it's holding it on. So we're going to just try and see if it just comes out this way. And I guess the side plate, looking at this, the side plate could be removed without taking the rotor off first. That's okay. All right. We have a, it says there's 6 ball bearings in there. This would be one of them in the side case. I'm just testing the bearing now. The bearing seems to test that okay. When I test it, There's a number of different ways you can test it, but I just generally will run my finger over the center core, roll it, and if it's rolling, we'll just oil it, keep it going. Next up, then we're going to remove the axle shaft. We're going to test this axle shaft because the reel is gummed up. There's no question that there's a lot of dirt and grease and debris in there. But I'm thinking that the major cause of this may be an axle shaft. If it's an axle shaft, you're not going to be able to find a replacement part for this. Okay, to remove the axle shaft, we're going to pull the screw in the crosswind block. It's a good place to tell you to take pictures. When you take the picture, it will give you the orientation. For example, it shows you how the crosswind block is, where your main gear is. And this case, kind of hard. Okay, well, I'm not sure it's a bad axle, but this is all gummed up and greased. This should be clear metal, and I think that's probably why we've got the issues that we have. My guess was bent, but now I'm just thinking it may just be gum. All right, take that out, remove the main gear. Main gear has a bearing on the back of it. Remove the crosswind gear. I like to grab the stud to pull that out. Sometimes these crosswind gears will have a screw holding it in the case, so just be aware of that as you're doing it. Yeah, I'm seeing everything here I'm seeing is just a bunch of dried grease and the like. I'm thinking we can restore the performance of this one easy enough. This is your anti-reverse override lever. I currently have it in the off position. Let's go over here and just see if we can't get that gummed surface to free up. I'm going to use a penetrating oil and a little bit of steel wool. If this is rust, it's going to have a much different result to it. Okay, now it's just tarnish. It's blemished on the metal, but it's not pitted or anything. So I think we should be okay. Best way to test the axle shaft now is just take the axle shaft and put it into the pinion gear. Make sure that it moves up and down free and easy. It does. Over here now, I'm concerned because that last part of this is a little tight going in and out. But that may also be that there's stuff inside the pinion gear, so we'll go ahead and address that next. I want to clean up these parts and put them into my tray before I do that. Next one I'll clean then is the crosswind block. Crosswind block on the back of this does have that ratchet for the anti-reverse. That should be a secondary here. Nope, it doesn't. There's nothing here. This is going to sit in there. There's nothing behind this one. Okay, that's cleaned. Let's see if we can pull that gear off. And we can't get the gear off without removing this little tie down for your case. And that seems like that's kind of stuck there. There we go. Now we should be able to get the bearing off. Again, you want to clean these. Put that right back onto the screw. That's where that belongs. Clean the bearing, test it. It seems to be doing okay as well. Oil it. This is one of those that says 6 ball bearings. We've seen 2 in a side case. I want to clean the back end of this. I'm going to guess there's one that they're going to call on top of the pinion gear. And then I guess the other 3 may be anywhere. Those are always kind of a little bit harder to tell. I haven't seen the North Shore brand before. When you see brands that you don't recognize, they're generally made by a reel manufacturer under various trade names, and they're called trade reels. So you'll have a plant, for example, this one is in China. Maybe their focus may be on making fishing reels, but maybe not marketing them. And so folks will go there and they'll contract for a certain number of wheels to be made under a certain design. It's sort of like ready-made fashion. You can go in and get shirts or what have you manufactured from a design catalog, and then they'll put your brand name on the label. Well, it's the same thing with fishing wheels. All right, once you do that, inspect the teeth. Again, because of that performance, we want to check the teeth. The teeth are in good condition. You want to check both front and back. These back teeth are going to drive the oscillation gear. The oscillation gear is going to move that axle shaft up and down. Oh, one more piece here. That's this anti-reverse clutch and pinion gear assembly. Now there's a override here with that spring, so I'm very concerned about that. I want to be careful as I take this off. I want to make sure, but you want to make sure of two things. The first is that this assembly is in the off position. You want to relax the tension on that spring. And then secondly, when we pull this cover, we want to see where that ring is and how that spring is set. So I'm going to be very careful here as I do that, because I don't want to lose the spring. That's a risk you can always run. Okay, here's your spring assembly. So that's what you want to take a note of. You have a spring that's buried in the case and sits on that little tag. And I'm going to stop the video for just a second here so that I can show you a way to do this that you don't have to worry about losing the spring. Okay, so I just went to get a plastic bag. And the best way to do this so that you don't lose the spring is put the wheel inside that plastic bag. And then go to move the spring. That way, if it shoots, it's going to shoot into the bag. Okay, well, we just lifted it up. I see it here. Oh, the spring did fall. So there you go. So this is your assembly. This is the stud where your spring is going to ride. And now, the spring should be in the bag. And there it is. It's down on the bottom of the bag here. That's how you keep the spring from getting lost. Okay, with that out, we should be able to move the pinion gear out. Oh, we have a collar on here. Saying that's too difficult to just pull up. So this is where taking pictures helps. And it'll help on the reinstall as well. That's your tie down for your anti-reverse bearing. And the other thing you want to note as you do this is the position of that collar and the position of the way that that tie down sleeve works. Well, this whole thing should come up now. You can see that there's a lot of dirt and grease and debris in here. We'll take care of that next. I'm just going to leave that assembly right there. We'll go clean this up. And again, we're concerned because there's a lot of grease and debris in the case. We want to make sure all of that gets cleared out. Okay, that takes care of that. I'm just going to move this up. This is a free-floating anti-reverse clutch, so I don't want to go too far with that. It's not a sealed one like you'll find on many of these. And if I pull that out, a rim, that inner rim with all the roller bearings is going to go. So we're just going to move that up and out of the way. I'm going to use my brush to clear out the grease and the pinion gear. Looks like I need a little bit more help there. So the theme of this one seems to be a lot of dried grease and dirt. We saw that on the axle shaft. I think that's probably the major cause for the issues here. That one's even a little too tight. So I'll just use a utility knife to clean out those tracks. I'm being careful here not to lose those roller bearings. Okay, this will be our setup then. I want to re-grease the pinion gear. And while I have this out, I want to take that axle shaft one more time and run it through and see if there's resistance here. And there is. It's a little tight right there. So that says that bottom of the axle shaft may be a little bit bent. And we're going to have to make do with what we can with that. All right, we want to set this now so that we have two things going. Your collar needs to sit properly and your top bearing needs to ride in the channel as we go to reinstall. Those two screws that I left here go next. One goes in each side. Now there's a chance that axle shaft will not be affected by the bend because the part that actually rides the spool is going to be up higher. However, that low end of the stroke may be what's dragging the performance of the reel. Okay, that goes back on. Test that, make sure that rides fine. Next up, I want to make sure that I have this set properly before I go to install the spring. There's some ridges on that anti-reverse clutch. Just want to make sure that this is seated properly in those ridges. Okay, that's the seating of the ridge. And this one should be fun. I'm going to take the one end of the spring and get that onto the stud. I think we're going to do it this way. We're going to put the spring on first. Sure it seats onto your piece and compress the spring into the carrier. Once that spring has been reset, go ahead and get that top cover. Place that on and then align that with the screw holes. And then the two screws, which I guess you can breathe after you put those two screws in. I'm not worried that the spring is going to pop. This is an example of the quality. Look at how that head is off-centered with the screw itself. It's amazing they could even get that piece in there. Okay, second screw goes in now. And then we're done with that upper end of the assembly. So again, I have a little bit of concern with that tag end of the axle shaft. We did see a lot of grease on there. So this is a chicken and the egg, which came first. Did the dried grease clog it, and then trying to reel with this force the torsion onto the axle shaft? Or was the axle shaft bent first? A lot of people ask me how axle shafts get bent. And one of the ways that it gets bent is that they generally become a problem. You've got the axle shaft installed, the spool all the way up top. Now this is, of course, it's down more here. You get snagged and you start pulling using your reel as a winch, if you will, with the anti-reverse locked in. And what happens is the torsion will bend that axle shaft and cause that issue. And it happens a lot more frequently than you might think. All right, the back bearing goes in to the case. We've oiled that. Please, when you grease your reels, use fishing reel grease. I'm using a fishing reel grease. It's Penn Precision Reel Grease. Grease on the back end of the oscillation gear. Grease onto the teeth after you check the teeth to make sure that they're all uniform and not at issue. And grease onto the face where that crosswind block is going to ride. Once you do that, you can center that over the stud and put that into the case. We're going to bring the main gear in next. Do the same thing. I checked the teeth before when I was taking you through this. We'll do it again. Front and back. Place that in. Crosswind block. Clean the back of that. Make sure that those grooves are all clear. This one you only need to get the grease in the back end of the block. The block goes over the stud in the case. Then you can bring the axle shaft down, flat side facing out, and make sure that you align the hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind block. With that done, then you can use that little screw that goes into the crosswind block. If you don't drop it somewhere. And we can put that back in. So a little dab of glue onto my screwdriver. See if I can't use that as a starter. I said glue, I meant grease as a glue. Alright, put that back on. And we have a shim washer which goes on the main gear. And the bearings in the case, we've oiled that bearing already. So let's go ahead and put the case back on. Nice snap. You want to make sure that your seams all around are nice and tight. The 3 case screws came from the other side. So let's go put those back in. That's a good point of the video to ask you that if you have any questions, whether it's on this reel or any reel, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, if you leave those questions in the comments section, I do try to answer those for you. I usually try to answer those in the mornings, so if you're leaving something in the evening, don't expect a quick response. But generally before I enter my shop, I do try to get in and answer questions about about anything in the comment section. So leave them here. Your question doesn't have to be on this reel. It can be on any reel. And we'll try to help you. The purpose of this channel is to show you how to service reels and how to do it yourself. So if you're getting stuck doing that, just leave that question. I like to use a penetrating oil in the seams of the bail. We can use some oil on a line roller. We'll assume that's where one of these bearings is. And we can take our rotor then and put that onto the assembly. I did notice when I took this off that this is a reverse threaded nut. So put it on in a counterclockwise manner once you get it started. This is a 10mm nut if you happen to be working on one of these reels. A lot of these reels are the 10mm, and you can use a deep socket. You can do it this way as well. Just need to remove that click ratchet in order to do that. Then tighten it down, give it a spin, make sure that it turns. They seem to be in good condition there. Put the handle on next. The handle was mounted from the left side. We have the two pieces. We have the little plastic piece which sits inside the main gear. Make sure you get that seated first, and then you can tighten down on the screw portion of this. Again, you can use a coin. I have a very thick screwdriver blade here, a very wide one. We'll use that. You should try to match your screwdriver blade to the slot of the screw. Okay, that's all in place now. I'm interested to see if we get improved performance here. We have the click ratchet, which is going to make the noise when your spool is letting out line under drag tension. That's kind of a bait alert or a bait alarm. This one controls the height of the line lay on the spool. If your spool is gathering too much line to the top, you need to add one of these. If it's gathering too much line to the bottom, sometimes called coning, you need to remove one. In this case, the line is even, so that's the right number. Last thing we want to do then is check the drags in here, and you can see this one's got a lot of dirt and debris in the top side as well. It's kind of a theme with this reel at the moment. I just use a screwdriver to remove the spring clip that holds the drags in. It is a spring clip, so make sure that you hold tight as you're removing that. We have felt washers in here, and felt washers need to be oiled. And we have, what do we have here? 2. So we have a lock set below. That's the first one. Then the first washer goes in. And you're going to douse that with oil. Don't be shy about the oil. You need to use the oil to keep the felt washers from drying out. If they dry out, they will split and crack, and then they won't be useful at all. I'll put the top washer back in, bring the clip back on. And then just compress your spring and make sure you get it into the groove inside that spool as the holder. Put this back on. That's the bait alarm below, and the spring click tongue inside the spool, letting you know that it's letting it out. All right, we'll see if the performance has improved at all, or if the bend in that axle shaft is pretty much compromised it completely. This has a secondary adjustable handle here, so we have to screw that into the main. You're going to tighten this up to tighten it, and you can collapse it by removing it. Let's give it a ride. Oh, much better. Much better. So it was the dried grease on the axle shaft that has caused the issue with this reel. Okay, there you go. That's how to service a generic reel. A little bit of a tip in terms of how to save yourself the anxiety of looking for a spring that may have popped by using a little plastic bag as you disassemble it, and a little bit of encouragement in terms of keeping your reels running. This one, well, it's been too long between the services on this one, so what you want to do is make sure that you service it a little bit more frequently. That'll keep it running smooth for a long time to come. I hope you've enjoyed that, and if you did, please like it. Again, if you like to see these types of videos, please subscribe. This is Dennis from Second Chance Tackle, thanking our first responders and folks involved in police, fire, rescue, and the like for keeping us safe. I do appreciate your efforts. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, keep your fishing equipment tuned up and ready to go. You never know when the bite will be on. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, thanking you. Have a great day.